Namaste, good evening, everybody. Firstly, I want to say that it's an absolute honor and a real privilege to be asked to deliver the 26th Lal Bahadur Shastri memorial lecture this evening. Like I said to Anilji, I didn't didn't know why I was asked. He was very kind to say that thank you, that I should be doing this. And though I wasn't convinced, I took upon it as a challenge, like I did with my cricketing commitments. And therefore, here I am. The list of the names of those who have delivered this lecture before is awe-inspiring indeed. There are Nobel laureates, spiritual leaders, eminent jurists, honorable ministers of earlier governments, industrialists, job creators, wealth creators, people whose social service is an example to all of us. In short, these boots are simply too big to fill by a sports person. But thank you for having me here. And like I said, I will take this up as a challenge. And to be perfectly honest, I've never been as nervous, even on the eve of my first test match for India, as I am today. And perhaps you can hear that in the quiver in my voice, which you probably don't hear when I'm doing a little bit of commentary, but there it is. And today particularly, I'm even more nervous because the country is in turmoil. And whatever I'm going to say about the changing face of Indian cricket is not going to ease it one bit. Some of our youngsters are out in the streets instead of being in their classrooms, and some of them are ending up in hospitals for being out on the streets. Admittedly, the majority are still in classrooms trying to forge a career and to build and take India forward. We as a nation can go higher only when we are all together. When each one of us has to be simply Indian, first and foremost. That is what the game taught us, that we win when we pull together as one. India has overcome many crises in the past, and it will overcome this one as well, and be the better and stronger for it. Our minds go back to one such major crisis in 1965, when our neighbors invaded us and got a fitting reply. The leader of our nation then was a man whose size belied his inner strength and resolve. His leadership and quick decision-making gave the country some of its most glorious moments as the invaders had to beat a hasty retreat. The respected and revered late Sri Lal Bahadur Shastri was that leader who stood tall and inspired the country to be resilient in the face of daunting odds. It was his decisiveness and quick thinking that helped our armed forces to thwart the invaders. His refusal to bow to pressure from those supporting the invaders made him even more popular with the masses. The food crisis and the war were the two major issues he had to tackle, and he did it with aplomb, and in doing so gave India the timeless movement, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. The entire nation responded to it as one. And while there is always respect for the Jawans and the Kisans, then and even now, as the Jawans safeguard our borders and territory, the Kisans put food on our tables. There is today even more respect, coupled with affection, for our Jawans and Kisans, and it was Shastri ji who made us aware of their contribution to our country. When the food crisis was on, Shastri ji's exhortation to the country to miss one meal to combat the crisis had a spontaneous response all over India. It had an impact on our family as well. My beloved late father said to us that we must do what the PM has asked us, but added that since me and my sisters were growing up then, that while we would not miss a meal, we would eat either roti or rice, but not both in one meal. Even today, I eat mainly rotis and no rice in the same meal, never. The only exception, of course, is at Maharashtrian weddings, where one can't avoid what's put on the table, dining plate, by those who feed you at the wedding. Making sacrifices for the country, standing up for his dignity and honor is what Shastriji's life was all about. And he never asked others to do what he himself wouldn't do. What was learned from him was that size, looks, and appearances do not make it the man. It's the inner resolve, integrity, and genuine concern for others that does. And that's why it is an absolute honor to be here to speak at this lecture. Indian cricket has been fortunate to have had some captains who embodied the same principles. And Indian cricket got stronger because of their leadership. It wouldn't be right for me to speak about Indian cricket that was there before I even held a bat. Yes, there is the written word about those times, but having read the written word about my era, I know how much of it is true and how much sheer perception. Not for a moment does this mean that there is malified intent in what's been written. But things, when seen from a distance, are not what they seem and actually are. Be that as it may, Indian cricket has to be forever grateful to Colonel C.K. Nayudu, Lala Amarnath ji, Amar Singh ji, Mohammad Nisar ji, to name a few, from the earliest of India's test teams. Their dashing cricket won the hearts of the Indian cricket lover and helped make it more popular among the masses. Who can forget the effortless sixes that Colonel C.K. Nayudu hit and the chanceless century by Lala ji in his first test? He became the first Indian to hit a century in test cricket. And legend has it that when he returned to the pavilion, he was showered with gifts from cricket lovers who were thrilled with the way the occupiers' attack was put to the sword. Women apparently took off their jewelry and threw it at him as the dashing batsman walked back to the change rooms. That must have been something, because many a time when the team that I played in lost the match, we had rubbish thrown at us. This has baffled me, as when we did well, nobody threw valuables at us. The Indian crowd, of course, has matured greatly since those violent days of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and is more accepting that in sport, one can't always win. It's a generational change as well, as today's spectator is a lot better off than those days when frustration with the way some of their lives were shaping made them take it out on the players in the teams that lost. Lalaji, of course, was shortly thereafter involved in a colorful episode where he is supposed to have chided the then Indian captain with the phrase "Teri maa ki," which another brilliant Punjabi, Harbhajan Singh, also used more than 70 years later to an Australian who was unnecessarily needling him. Why nobody advised the off-spinner at the inquiry that he only said "Teri maa ki chunari" or "Teri maa ki chudiyan" is a mystery. Instead, the handsome Sardar was made to confess that the word he chose was a choicier chew than chunari and chudiya. He ended up being fined a considerable amount of his match fees. But of course, with the IPL that was just round the corner then, those match fees was like peanuts, which you would offer a monkey. The Second World War interrupted the careers of not just Amarnath ji, Colonel C.K. Nayudu, but also of the Emperor of Technique, Vijay Merchant, and the genius Vinu Mankad. India didn't play a test match for 10 years. And when cricket resumed after the war ended, all these players had lost out on the most productive years of their cricketing careers. Just imagine the statistics of these stalwarts if there had been no World War II. They would have been as mind-blowing as those of Sachin Tendulkar and the current harvester of centuries, Virat Kohli. Still, the 1946 tour of England gave glimpses of the impeccable technique and temperament of Vijay Merchant and the dash and verve of Syed Mushtaq Ali and, of course, Vinu Mankad. Another Vijay was beginning to challenge Merchant for being the best batsman in the Indian team. And the tour of Australia, after India got independence, established that when Vijay Hazare got a century in each innings in Australia against Don Bradman's team, comprising of Ray Lindwall, Keith Miller, and Bill Johnston. That was the period when Indian cricket started a downward spiral, where England pulverized them, though at home the Indian team was unbeatable. And even though they did not always win, they did not lose either. Draws became the theme of the game then, and thus earned India the title of Dull Dogs. We came to 1960s. Sorry. I've written against my airline ticket, so just a little. I normally speak extempo, but I was a little unsure of the audience today, so I thought I might as well write a little bit down. My handwriting is not the best, but please excuse me. The 1960s was by far the most glamorous decade in Indian cricket. Never before have there been so many handsome and good-looking players as in that decade. There was the debonair Mansoor Ali Khan Patodi, the captain of the team, Farooq Engineer, the Brill Trim boy, Salim Durrani, M.L. Jaisima, Abbas Ali Beg, who was once kissed as he returned to the pavilion after a strokeful half-century. When Vijay Merchant, who was commentating on All India Radio at that time, then asked where were these ladies when he was reeling out century after century, his fellow commentator promptly responded that they had probably fallen asleep while he was batting. Come to think of it, That must have been the case even when I was batting, for even my wife never blew me a kiss after a knock. As a teenager growing up in the 1960s, we used to hear through the cricketing grapevine, and it is fairly reliable, the cricketing grapevine, that these handsome dudes were dating film stars and models. That was certainly a great incentive to us teenagers then, even as the IPL moolah and the accompanying perks are an incentive to today's budding cricketers. Today the IPL dominates even the Ranji Trophy, and unless the playing fees for the first-class cricketer is substantially increased, he will always feel like the orphan and poor cousin of Indian cricket. The Ranji Trophy had started in 1933-34, but there was also the Pentangulars, which was based on teams selected on communal lines. Gandhiji quickly saw the danger in this, and the tournament stopped shortly thereafter. The patrons of the game in the early days were the princely houses, and they employed the cricketers and looked after them splendidly. The 1950s and 60s saw this change as many corporates came forward to employ not just cricketers but other sports persons as well. So many a mighty battle was fought between the corporate teams, some of whom were better than some Ranji Trophy teams playing there. India was still having a dismal record overseas in the 60s, with the silver lining being the win in New Zealand in 1967-68. The first time that an Indian team had won overseas. Sadly, that was followed by a sorry display against New Zealand when they returned the visit in 69-70, and the Australians who beat India yet again. That Australia series saw the debut, who I think was the best batsman of my generation, G.R. Vishwanath. Vishy conjured up shots with strong wrists that had even the opposition bowlers and fielders applauding with their mouths open in sheer awe. When Vishy got a century, India never lost that test match. Nobody else in the world has that distinction. His gentle, self-effacing manner on and off the field endeared him to all and sundry. And truly, if there's one cricketer about whom nobody has an ill word to say, that is GRV. The loss to Australia in 69-70 had started a debate about the leadership of the team. And while admittedly a captain is only as good as his team, the new selection committee felt it was time for a change and appointed Ajit Wadekar as the new Indian captain. The disquiet that followed that appointment was quickly replaced by claps of approval as India beat West Indies for the first time in a test series and followed up with a win over England in England. Again a first time. And then beating England in India. 3 back-to-back wins, 2 of them overseas, had made the Indian cricket lover delirious with joy. However, as it happens in sport, and especially in cricket, the wheel turned and India were rubbished by England in all 3 test matches in 1974, with the ignominy of being dismissed for 42 at Lords. Clearly, Wadekar was not going to keep his captaincy, but he not only lost that, but also his place in the West Zone team, which prompted him to take sannyas from the game. The second half of the 70s excuse me, saw the emergence of the one and only Kapil Nikhanj. His vitality, his fearlessness, his unending energy, and the joy de vivre brought in an exhilarating breath of fresh air in Indian cricket. He was capable of turning the game around with both bat and ball. But his greatest legacy was to show the budding India fast bowler that even on pitches with not much assistance to them, they could take wickets. If today India has a cornucopia of fast bowlers, it is thanks to Kapil Dev. Kapil was like a Pied Piper, with children following him, looking adoringly up at him. It was a sight that showed Indian cricket was in the right place. There was the Packer series around also at the same time, which brought about a revolution, not only in terms of remuneration to the players, but also in the way the one-day game began to be marketed. Then came what I think, and maybe I'm biased, India's greatest moment in 1983. India won the World Cup, that too against all odds. Once again, the game changer was the skipper Kapil Dev, whose individual brilliance and positive mindset helped the team believe nothing was beyond them. That match also was seen live in colour in India, and it sent the Indian cricket lovers into delirium, and at the same time established cricket as the #1 sport in India. The winning culture and never say die spirit that started under Ajit Wadekar's captaincy culminated in that famous win. In 1993, also there was a sea change as the Supreme Court allowed the BCCI to sell rights to cable networks. Till then the BCCI had to beg and plead with Doordarshan to cover the test matches and even had to pay for the coverage. With the rights now open, a new era of TV broadcasting enabled Indian viewers to see top-class coverage of their favorite sport. What live coverage also did was to open the doors to elements who wanted to make money by corrupt means. In the late 90s, saw many a big name in the sport lured by the prospect of easy money to do things that I'm pretty certain that they regret today. Suddenly with this revelation, Indian cricket lost credibility, and people began to suspect every game and player. What was needed at this stage was a team of players with impeccable reputations, and fortunately, India had them in Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, Anil Kumble, Virendra Sehwag, and Saurav Ganguly, to name a few. Ganguly was made captain, and under him the team flourished. Those were some of the best years in Indian cricket, as it stood toe-to-toe with the best in the world. Even better days lay ahead, as under a new dynamic skipper, Mahendra Singh Dhoni, India won the first ever ICC T20 World Cup, and that too without the big names Tendulkar, Dravid, Ganguly, Lakshman, Kumble. 3 years later, India won the 50 overs World Cup after 28 years, when the skipper, no more the long-haired boy he was in 2007, but now with even better tonking ability, smashed a 6 to win the World Cup again. If Dhoni was captain cool with a temperament that was the envy of all, he was followed by a young man who is all fire. His batting is worth travelling miles to see, as also his other teammate, Rohit Sharma. And with a bowling attack capable of bowling teams out on any surface, India is a team to be feared, not just at home, but overseas as well. During all this period, of course, came a disruptor, as the moderns like to call it, the IPL. It changed the dynamics totally. And with the moolah raking in, India's clout grew. Suddenly, India was where everybody wanted to be. And India was the team everybody wanted to invite to their countries. That is how the face of Indian cricket has changed over the years. From the team taking uncertain baby steps to the team that did not have enough confidence in its ability, to the team that had the W of winning under Wadekar, to the team that did the impossible in 1983, to the team that cricket lovers began to doubt, to the team that restored belief, to the team that now everybody has to beat to get their own team recognized as a good one. It's been a roller coaster of a ride, but it's been fun watching the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, the tears and the smiles. The future, as they say, is bright. Yes, there will be the odd stumble here and there, for that is the nature of sport. But I do believe that for Indian cricket, the Achhe Din have well and truly begun. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.